In today's podcast, we have a special guest, Lori, who is going to share with us some inspirational stories about being in her center, just going for it and making it happen, as well as being supported by things that fall literally in front of her to inspire her and give her confidence to keep going on this path for herself.
Welcome to Expansive Minds Podcast, Gateway to Freedom, a podcast where two friends, Aileen and Nancy, explore and expand beyond what they think they know in order to live a life of freedom. Thank you for joining us, and away we go.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. There's somebody in the room.
Look how close we
Aileen.
are today.
I know. We're snuggling. I need a fireplace right here. And chocolate.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Aileen brought us a friend.
Yes, so today we have Lori, who is going to talk about some magical things that have happened to her in her life. For me, she's very inspirational. Lori has spent a lot of time in her life searching, continuing to search. She's so hopeful. She jumps in, she learns, then she's like, I'm done learning that, I'm gonna move on to the next thing. And that's something that really impresses me, that you're able to do that. So we're gonna talk to Lori and hear some stories about all the magical things that have happened in Lori's life.
Love it. So let me kick off the intention, and then we will go. Okay. We ask to be channels of love and light. We welcome new energy into this space, and we ask that everything we say and do here lifts us and all, and so it is.
So it is.
So it is.
So thank you for being here, Lori. I'm really excited.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here.
So there's so many places to start. One of the things I'm thinking about, because you have something on the table, which is just an incredible story. So maybe just start telling us what you have on the table, and then you can just sort of backtrack and jump in, because this is such a tangible demonstration. And it seemed that you knew when you saw it, and you were like, that's what it is.
Okay. So this is what's called an aport, and actually when you try and look at it in the dictionary, it's not there. Mm-hmm. I don't understand why not, but this is says allow for expansion, and I came upon it during a time when it was time for me to expand, and I'll explain more about how that came to be through the whole story. And so yes, I have been on a spiritual path for a very long time, and probably over 20 years ago, I went down the Buddhist path, and I studied to become a Buddhist priest, and actually went to Taiwan and was ordained. And I was in the UU church with Aileen. Sunday evenings, I had a sangha for 6 years, every Sunday evening, and Aileen was doing the goddess work as well as being the religious education person, and we would pass. And I kept thinking, oh my gosh, I really want to spend more time with Aileen. And but
Was that how you met? Was that the first time you met? Was that the church?
Yep.
It was,
So,
yeah. So she was the religious educator for my kids while they were there, and I just love her. She's so amazing. And so I was also, and have been for probably like 50 years now, been in the corporate world. I'm still working. Mm-hmm. And even though I've had a very, very full-time job for many years in technology, I know that you were in technology, I still really wanted to go down the spiritual path. So I did all this training for the ordination for the Buddhist priest, did that for 6 years, and then I started going to a holistic doctor in Middleton, Dr. Rod Stockwell, for some issues I was having, and he turned me on to intuitive healing. And so I switched paths, and it was so cool because I really wasn't into any metaphysical stuff at the time. My Buddhist teacher, he didn't really want us to go there. And even though I believed that that when the body dies, it's not the end, it was just a belief at that point. And it wasn't until I went down the New Age path that it was a knowing. And some of the amazing things that happened to me through that whole process, like I learned about Abraham Hicks and Wayne Dyer and Carolyn Myss and so on and so forth in the books. And then I picked up A Course in Miracles. So are you familiar?
That's the big one. That's the first one, right? I mean, I went to there. I started with Eckhart.
Okay, yeah, I've read
and
some of his.
he referred to Course of Miracles all the time in his book. So then I grabbed that. Yes.
Well, it was a really good thing that I picked up that book because, well, as people maybe you don't know, it's it's a year-long training. There's one chapter per day, 365 days, and because at that point I was starting to feel like my marriage was falling apart. Like we were I was growing this way, and he wasn't, and it was a really hard time for me. You know, you were talking about the dark night of the soul. Mm-hmm. This is when it really came to be for me. So I just adored him. He's an amazing person in terms of very charismatic, very intelligent, very artistic, and I was still holding on to that, but there was so many things foundationally that it just wasn't serving me to be in the marriage, and so that was a big process. And at one point, I went to see Jennifer Landry. She's a shamanic astrologer, and then all of our spiritual group has started seeing her. She's an amazing person, and really starting to learn more about what's going on for me and the planets and so on and so forth. And then at that point, around that time, I was really feeling like it's time to separate, and my heart was just like feeling like it was ripped in two. And then it was this process of finding the courage of when to tell him I need to move on. And that's where the story gets really interesting. It gets so interesting. So Jennifer had invited me to come back for another session because she was doing this work on the Venus return, and that's the whole going down as the feminine divine, going down into the underworld, taking off your garments, your crown and your cape and so on and so forth, and then dying, going into the ashes, and then resurrecting. And so it was right around this time, 10 years ago, 13 years ago, where I saw her, and, the day before, actually, I was with my girlfriends, and we decided, it would be fun to go see a psychic medium, and or actually, she's a medium psychic, Maria Halverson from Beverly, and so we were all together for that. And the first person that came into the room was my brother, who had passed away like 25 years prior. And she described, she didn't know any of us, and she described him to a T. And then at one point she said, he's saying that at one point he would have sided with your husband, but now he sides with you. And I just burst into tears because it's like, oh my God, I'm getting these messages from people who love me that they know.
Yeah.
And then my grandmother came into the room. Once again, it was like she was there, the way she described her. And she said, she's telling me that your spiritual path is very beautiful, and your husband's afraid because he doesn't understand what's going on. And she's also saying, stop defending him because nobody's buying it.
Oh, wow.
I know, so that right there, like getting that information
Yeah.
that gives you the courage, you know?
Yeah.
And then the next day is when I saw Jennifer Landry again. And so she told me all about the Venus return, and she described each month with the moon and what was happening. And she said, oh, and then in December, you really came into your power chakra. And I'm like, yeah, that was the first time I ever like totally blew up at my husband. And I did feel so powerful. I've never
Nice.
been like that before. And as she described each month, it's like, yes, yes. And she said, and tomorrow, she said the moon and Venus and whatever she described, it's going to be very powerful, and it'll be your third eye chakra. It's going to open. And she said, so just, be aware and open for that. I'm like, okay, all right. And I went home that night, and, everything's just swirling around, and went into work the next day, didn't think anything of it, did my work, and then I stepped outside to get to my car, and I realized, oh my God, I'm going home to tell my husband that we're separating. And I burst into tears. It was so frightening and so sad, but it was kind of like I got to the point where I couldn't not tell him. And I'm driving home and I'm screaming and crying, oh my God, I'm going to tell him. And which I
And he's
did.
clueless. He doesn't see this coming.
Oh, no, he does, because I guess I found out afterwards that when I blew up at him in December, he was like, oh, she's going to divorce me.
Oh, wow.
Because for several years, I'm like, come on, get on.
Right.
You have so much trauma. He had so
There's
much
a lot
trauma.
of trauma. I mean, I think that's important
my
to
gosh,
say too.
yeah.
And not of his own making.
Right, from childhood, and he was in
Right,
Vietnam.
a Vietnam veteran.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of
so
trauma,
much
not of his
trauma.
own making.
So,
and yet it still is there. I mean, that's such an important part of your
Right.
story, right? It's
Right.
that fine line of
Right.
how much am I helping? Am I helping? Where's that line between helping and enabling
Exactly.
and codependency? And so
Exactly.
the other
yeah.
thing, just listening to you, when you said, you came out to your car, a lot of times when we have these thoughts like, when am I going to do it? Or how do I know? Do I stay? Do I, the fork in the road? And I myself had a moment where I knew that I knew. And I think when we experience, I know that I know, then we can trust further on in our life when there's a decision to be made. We know when we know. And so it just sounded, when you said that, Lori, it made me think, you knew that you knew then. You knew that you knew.
And that's
Yeah.
what Abraham Hicks says. If it's not a hell yeah, it's a hell no. You will almost be,
Right.
not robotically, but you can't not do it.
Right.
Right.
When it's
exactly.
when it's
But
time.
when it's time, you
When
just
it's
know that
time.
you know. So it's sort of,
Yeah.
as we're
And
in limbo sometimes of what am I going to do? It's
Yeah.
like, just trust. You will know when you
Exactly.
know. And,
And
you
I-
did.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say, because when you were speaking, there was something I thought was so powerful, and I wanted to call it out. There's the distinction between the belief and the knowing.
Yeah, right,
I loved
right.
how you made
Yes,
that.
agreed.
Because it is.
Yeah.
Because there have been times where on my spiritual journey, I'm like, yeah, I believe it. And then you might sit in meditation or have your night of the soul, and then you feel the tactile, the actual presence, and you're like, oh, now I know. I mean, I believed it, but there's a difference
Yeah.
between really embodying it.
Yes.
And actually, I feel as though, in many ways, I feel as though that's how I've lived my life. Even before that, that I sit with it. I'm not one of these people that vacillates and worries about what should I do. And I really attribute that to my parents. Like, they raised us to be independent and to think for ourselves. They weren't helicopter parents. They allowed us to make our own choices, and I feel like that, the number one gift is love, and I feel like the next gift is to allow you to tap into your own inner knowing, your own GPS, your inner guidance, to navigate your lives. I mean, that's huge.
It's so funny
That's
because
huge.
Gabby and I were having a conversation, pointing to where Gabby's, this week, and she said, "Oh, Mom, you're right. You're always right." I said, "No, I'm not, Gabby." I said, "And you did the right thing. You have to know when it's right. And there is no right and wrong."
Yes.
But that's exactly the counsel I gave it. Like, trust your intuition. Yes, there's a lot of data around for you to take into account, but tap in, because that's the only way you are truly going to know.
For yourself.
Right.
What's
Yep.
for you.
Yep,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah, and it's really such a liberating way to go through your life, just trusting that when the path lights up, I'll take the next step. And then you're not, beating yourself up, like, oh, I should have done this, or when am I going to do, it's just, it does. It makes you go through your life more joyfully, I feel,
I agree.
more at ease.
So you're in your car, you're crying, you're on your way home to do it.
Yeah, so clearly my third eye chakra opened
Yeah.
at that moment. And so then the process up to at that point was determining, who was going to stay in the house and who was going to move out. And in the end, I decided to move out. I mean, you can just imagine what it feels like to say to your child, I don't want to be your mother anymore. And that's kind of how it was, because we were so close, And so it was traumatic enough that I was going to leave, and then I just didn't want him to have to be the one to move out of the house. But it took me a whole year to find, I think almost a whole year to finally find a new place. And in the meantime, Aileen and I had so many shenanigans together, so much fun, going out, partying, and doing all kinds of great things.
You were
And that-
notorious for that.
Oh
Our
my
last
God,
guest you
yeah,
had
she-
shenanigans with too. What's up with that?
She really helped keep my vibration high, and it was such a great time in my life, really. And then I also decided to do some work with Maria Halverson. I was learning how to the psychic medium stuff, and so I would go to weekly classes in Beverly. And actually, the first class that I went to, she had me partner with this man who had been going for a while, and she was going to do this with everybody, but stand in the middle of the circle, close your eyes, and describe what's coming to you. And the man said, "Wow," he said, "I've never seen this before, but you have this giant cross on your back." And I laughed, and it's like, yeah, because I'm crucifying myself with guilt of what I'm doing.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's,
And
wow.
right,
Very
right.
powerful. Very powerful image.
And then at some point he had turned us on to this this documentary that happened in England with some psychic mediums that would gather in the basement of one of their homes every week and channel people, and they would get like different messages, and then at some point they described how this newspaper came into the room just on the table like that, and it was from this woman that they had been speaking with in the non-physical, and it was a front page, something about her on the front page of it. And so that's when I learned about this thing called Aports, where things can come in from.
Yeah, please define that more. Aport,
A-P-O-R-T, I think.
And it is, because I didn't know what it was, but at the beginning when you said, but I didn't want to interrupt you.
Yeah.
The definition of an aport.
Yeah, so, I mean, I'll try to explain. I mean, we have more knowledge on it, but it's something that comes from the non-physical into the physical. I mean, it's something that is physical, but it just comes from out of nowhere.
It materializes.
Yeah,
Like when the
materializes.
masters in India will pull a jewel out of the air, like that?
Yeah.
Is that aporting?
Yeah. So aport has sort of port as in portal, so it's something that moves through dimensionally, right?
Yep.
Right.
So this is happening a lot more now, is what you're
Yes,
saying.
it
then.
is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now that,
This was our first
Oh.
this was the group's
I'm on
first.
it. This is my next point of study.
It's
I
really
am going to
cool.
learn how to do that.
This was our group's first real, I think, conscious, obvious aport, and it was so great.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay,
so,
yeah.
so what, okay, so then I finally found an apartment to move into, and my son and I moved in there
Nice.
the day before Easter.
Oh.
And so,
It was an old house, like this, like a two-family.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, and I had an
Older.
upstairs and downstairs,
Yeah.
so the bedrooms were upstairs.
How old was your son?
At the time, I think he was 16.
Okay.
And so the place was all freshly painted. We had just moved in, the boxes were still there, and I had gone downstairs to use the bathroom. There's nothing in there, and I'm sitting there, and then this piece of paper like floated down and landed on the floor on the opposite side, and I'm like, what was that? And I picked it up, and it said, "Allow for expansion."
And she's got it
And
framed.
I
right?
have it
Why
right
this is
here.
special. Is that the paper itself?
Yeah,
Yes.
here's- and then she framed it. There it is.
Oh my heavens.
Isn't that amazing?
Wow. I love it. I love too that you put the background on Birch. I just adore Birch. Wow. Very fabulous. Very fabulous.
Yeah,
There goes
I
my mic.
mean, I just kind of like burst into tears out of joy, like, oh
Yeah.
my God. Well, first of all, that I even knew what an aport was, and I had just learned about them.
Yep.
And
Wow.
I was telling my son, oh my God, look what I just got.
Coming out of the
amazing,
bathroom.
yeah.
Look at
And then I called my parents, and my mom's into the occult, and my dad not really, and not spiritual. But when I describe it, he said, that's just like in the Forrest Gump movie when he was thinking about his girlfriend and the feather fell down. I'm like, oh my God, Dad, you get it, you get it. So they know how special it is. And then I was thinking, it's Easter morning. I'm no longer, I'm resurrected.
carrying the cross.
I'm not
Yes.
crucified
You're not
anymore.
crucified.
Isn't that great?
Resurrected. And I
That
felt
is so
that.
poetic.
Yeah.
Like just
Yeah,
it is.
unfolded so
Yeah.
serendipitously.
And then
It's
the
beautiful.
the very next evening, Monday evening, I had my my class with Maria Halverson, and she was talking about all the stuff that we were seeing in the documentary and the aports. And she goes, if you do enough of this work, at some point you might actually get an aport. And I'm like,
My goodness. Do you know the name of that documentary? Do you remember the name of it?
I could probably find out. I could probably find
All
out.
right, if you
It
find
was
out,
a
we'll
long time
sneak
ago.
it in on the post somehow.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because I have to study aports now.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm so excited to have something
great,
new
isn't
to explore.
We won't find it in the dictionary.
Yeah,
I've looked.
yeah. Well, I find it in the occult section of Barnes & Noble's because when I started going into this stuff, I had to go into the occult section of Barnes & Noble's
I don't know.
to find the Body Electric, I believe it was.
I mean, Aileen has a lot of aport stories, I would say.
Yeah, we have some aport
Yeah,
stories
yeah.
now. Yeah.
Well, let's do a time check with Bella Boo.
Okay.
Baby girl, how are we doing on time?
About the 20-minute mark.
Okay. All right.
So, I'm thinking, quick, what story I love? The traveling story. When you wanted to go, and the whole thing with the tickets
Oh,
and the.
yeah. So one last thing, though,
Oh, yeah,
is,
go do that, yes.
is that that morning, that Easter morning, we were meeting, our spiritual group was meeting. So it was just perfect for me because I got to be with them. We were on the green in Lexington,
Oh,
we were
yeah.
having a picnic, and I was so excited to tell everyone. And it's kind of like it's our aport.
Yes.
It's our aport, and we talk about allowing for expansion, which you hear Abraham talk about all the time. And I went back to my Jennifer Landry reading, and it was like she mentioned expanding 12 times in my reading, because
Oh,
I
wow.
always transcribe them. I'm like, yep.
That's
This was meant
beautiful.
for
And the
us.
Jennifer Landry, which was great, is in my mind. I didn't know Lori had any of that going on. In my mind, I'm thinking, I really feel like I need to see an astrologer, but I don't know. How do I trust? I mean, I'm not really into astrology. It's like, how do I know how to find one? They're all over the place. And then, like a day or two later, Lori's like, hey, I just went to this amazing astrologer, a shaman astrologer. I was like, thank you very much.
And she was pretty remarkable
I just
for you.
thought
You were
about it.
blown
I thought,
away.
How do I find one.
Yeah.
Oh, Lori's going to one and is going to tell me about it.
We got our tribe.
Like, yeah.
So Kimmy bought Gabby a Jennifer
Oh, yes.
rating.
Yes.
When she was like senior in high school, just trying to find direction, and then she bought me one over COVID. So we have all shared the Jennifer experience, which
Oh,
is
so
beautiful.
you've-
And you're
okay.
inspiring me to look up because we recorded it
Oh, to watch
because
it
we were
again.
over Zoom, and so so I'm actually going to dig up that file.
Yeah.
She's so
See,
positive.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
what I loved about her.
I love
So
the
positive.
transits. To me, when they do the transits, it's a little more like 'cause there's so much. It's so technical.
Right.
But when they say the transits, I can actually sort of tie in action and physical with the planet cycles. So,
Right? Isn't
yeah,
that amazing?
it's so amazing.
Yeah, and I actually have a lot of Jennifer Landry stories in terms of manifesting things, but to tell about this story here.
Because
and
she's,
this,
let me just say, Lori has traveled all over the place, and she will. This is one of the things where she's like, "Oh, well, there's this program I want to do with like rod stock or some
Yeah.
magical thing that she wants to do." And she's like, "Oh, I wonder if I can get the time off from work. I wanted to." And all of a sudden, she's gone. It's like, oh, her work will be like, "Yeah, sure, go for 14 days to do this or
And
whatever."
I want to
It's
hear that
amazing.
story too, but I know we're running out of time because I would love to also know how you marry corporate America
I know there's so much.
with this.
That's why she'll have
because
to come back.
Yeah, they generally don't overlay. And then do you use some of these concepts while you're in corporate America to calm
gosh.
people down, to
Someone's
let
gonna
them
talk
see the
about-
perspective? So we might have to talk corporate
Yeah.
We'll have to
another
talk-
time.
yeah,
So let's get that
absolutely.
last story, but then put that on the
This
table.
travel story, just
Okay.
because and it did involve you having to leave work to go do this thing.
This is true, yeah.
Yeah.
So I had signed up for this 6-month program, and I had used up almost all my vacation up to that point. The first time was in Alaska for 2 weeks in July, so I used my last 2 weeks. The next time was in South Africa a month and a half later, 2 months later, for 2 weeks. I was on the biggest technology project. I was a number 2 person, and I got a leave of absence for that. I went away for 2 weeks. Then the next time was in Missouri for a week over Thanksgiving. I got a leave of absence for that. And then the final was 2 weeks in Maui in February, which I had more vacation, so I was able to take that as well.
It
And
just didn't stop you. You're just like, oh, it'll
Yeah,
work
go
itself
on.
out. And yeah, so the ticket.
yeah, so then in the middle of all that, the teachers were doing an expo up in Alberta, Canada, or Vancouver, I can't remember what. And they're like, come on, anybody that wants to join us, and we're gonna, because these were healing tools, these energetic healing tools that they were demoing and selling and so on and so forth. And come on, and I'm thinking, I can't, I would have to like drop everything and leave the next day. And then
And you did?
and we have this exercise that we would do every night where you tap into your oracle. And so I went to bed that night, and my oracle said, "You need to go." And I'm like, well, if I'm going to believe this stuff, then I have to listen to it. So my husband comes to bed, and I'm like, yeah, I'm actually going to go to Alaska tomorrow for the weekend. And I think it was a Thursday. And he's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do it. So I went online at midnight to book the ticket. And then I called them the next day, and I think they're like, "Oh my God, wow, you're really going to join us? That's awesome!" And there was this big presentation that I had to do on Monday, and so I went in. They said, "Can you bring your massage table?" I said, "Okay." So I packed. I went into work, and I said, "I have to leave at noon for a flight to Alaska, but I should be back by Monday. But if I'm not, I'm going to show somebody else how to do this presentation." And the project manager's like, "Oh, okay."
That's awesome.
And I got this person on board, and blah, blah, blah. And I was like in the zone, because I still had to finish the deck, the slide deck and everything. Got it all done, get to the airport. Oh, plus the ticket was $1,200. I get to the airport, and he says, he said, this flight is for a week from today. So it was midnight. I
Yeah,
like
yeah,
screwed
yeah,
up,
yeah.
when I'm like, oh, well, I have to go today. And he's like, because, okay, well, you booked it through Expedia or
Yeah.
something. We can't help you with that. And I'm like, okay. So I sat down. I had the massage table on the floor, just,
Yeah.
and I sat down there because I was determined. I'm going to go, and they said, okay, well, we'll go ahead and cancel it. And because you're new, you don't have to pay the insurance and and you got all your money back. And okay, great.
Yeah.
So I go up to the counter, and now it's a different person. And I said I wanted to go. She goes, oh, well, we only have this flight. And I'm like, oh no, I have to get there at this time because they're going to be there to pick me up. This is before cell phones,
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay, all right, well, yeah, we got to the flight. It's $600.
Wow.
Round
Half
trip. I
price.
said, yes.
That's amazing.
So then I get there and I'm telling them all the story. And they're the teachers, right? And they're like, that's what we're talking
That's what we're
about.
talking about,
You
manifesting.
the universe said, oh, she's going and she's not in
I
fear
love
mode. She's like, she's wants to go. So we're going to like open it up and make it
love it.
happen. And they were all like blown away.
So I think like that's inspiring to me. So I think we kind of wrap it up. We're running out of time, but our lesson to just listen and go. I mean,
Yes.
let's close. How would you close this up for us with that? That's like so inspiring.
It is so inspiring. That's what's amazing
Yeah.
about Lori. Some of the things we've talked about recently in the podcast is not to have other people, external,
Yeah.
right, judgments, take us down a path of fear or not trusting ourselves. And Lori she keyed into her intuition. She worked at it, and every step that she took brought her to another level of expansion and belief and trust. And she was like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this.
So do it.
So do
Do
it.
it.
Tap
That's
into the intuition
yeah.
and keep following the path that takes you to more expansion
Exactly.
and more directed self-love and
Yes.
intuition.
And thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome.
And we
Thank
hope
you
to
for
see you
having
again.
me.
I hope.
Yeah. Oh,
And
we'll
I'm
have-
I
so
wanna hear it.
grateful that everything that you do is all recorded. These stories.
It's pretty
Just
great.
Wonderful.
yeah, sharing the
Thank you.
love.
Yeah,
Love it.
yeah,
I
yeah.
love it.
And
Thank
as
you.
always, more to
More
be revealed.
Thank you for joining us on Expansive Minds podcast, Gateway to Freedom. Until next time, more to be revealed.